While you watch this video, keep these questions in mind. 1. What was the goal of the United Nations when it was created? 2. Why did the League of Nations fail? 3. How are all the states equal in the General Assembly? 4. What about the Security Council made major world powers join the United Nations when they may not have joined the League? 5. How is modern war different from wars when the United Nations was created? 6. How has the United Nations changed their approach to prevent conflict? 7. What is UNHCR responsible for? Keep those in mind and be ready to talk about them in class.
What is the United Nations? Well, according to their own mission statement, the United Nations exists to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations, to cooperate in solving international economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian problems, and in promoting respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in attaining these ends. This supranational organization was created following the disintegration of the League of Nations post-World War II. If you remember, the League of Nations was meant to ensure the collective security of its member nations after World War I. There was never supposed to be another world conflict. Collective security is defined as the implicit idea that peace is indivisible and all states have a collective interest in maintaining international peace. Furthermore, all states are responsible to act in situations of interstate aggression. This internationalist outlook believes it is in the best interest of each nation to promote international peace. However, the League of Nations failed drastically. Why? First of all, when we look at the map of the League of Nations member countries, we can see some glaring omissions. Who is not part of the League of Nations? The United States and Russia never joined, and the absence of these two superpowers was a significant factor in the demise of the League of Nations and the rise of conflict following the interwar period. Once Germany had invaded the Rhine without repercussions, it was clear that the League of Nations was unable to follow through on its mandate. The United Nations attempts to combat this issue by ensuring that all of the world's superpowers are members. The United States was tempted into joining the UN, even though it did not join the League of Nations, because it was guaranteed special powers within the international body.
So what does the UN look like? The UN is made up of 6 main bodies, each with different roles within the organization. However, for our purposes, we only need to know about 4 of them. They are the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, and the International Court of Justice. First off, we have the General Assembly. Every state with recognized sovereignty and self-government has a seat in the General Assembly. Each state has 1 vote, so all states, regardless of size or power, has equal opportunity to be heard. The major function of the General Assembly is to debate and negotiate, set agendas and resolutions, coordinate economic and social efforts, and elect states and people for roles within the UN. Next up, we have the Security Council. There are 15 members of the Security Council, 5 permanent members, the US, Russia, France, the United Kingdom, and China, and 10 non-permanent members elected by the General Assembly for 2-year terms. Remember when we mentioned that there were special powers given to the US, which convinced them to join the UN? The Security Council is where that power comes into play. The 5 permanent members of the Security Council have one very important power, a veto. It's the job of the Security Council to vote on what action the international community should take on issues of concern. That being said, the permanent members of the Security Council can use the veto to stop any action at any time, regardless of the impact on the world.
Even though the United Nations is an international body, each nation is still motivated by nationalism and national interest. This can create conflict and immobility within the United Nations and can hamper the ability of the UN to carry out its mandate to maintain peace. This was exemplified in the case of Rwanda. The United States and France did not want to get troops involved in another civil war, and thus they refused to allow the UN to have active troops, only observation. This led to one of the world's largest and most violent genocides occurring as the world watched and did nothing. Another issue with the UN is that it was created to deal with conflict between states rather than conflict within states. which is the majority of modern conflict. This is seen in Kosovo and in Indonesia, and most recently in Syria. This has led to massive human rights violations, wars, and genocide, since the UN is unable to act to intervene with conflict. This occurs because the UN needs consent to enter the countries, and if the government itself is the aggressor towards its own people, they will not give the UN consent to intervene. Though the Security Council and the General Assembly are the most important to understand, there are also other bodies within the UN which are important for us to know about.
The Economic and Social Council, also known as ECOSOC, is the United Nations central platform for reflection, debate, and innovative thinking on sustainable development. ECOSOC created the UN Millennium Development Goals, which are 8 goals designed to make the world a better place. Largely, these include access to clean water, ending world hunger, and creating gender equality. These goals demonstrate a change in focus by the UN from conflict resolution to conflict prevention. A subcommittee of ECOSOC is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It aims to protect refugees, help them seek asylum in other countries, provide aid, ensure the environment is not unduly affected by migration, and try to provide alternatives to refugee camps. UNHCR also runs refugee camps, and they try to provide and ensure human rights within those camps.
There is one more international body which is important to our understanding of the UN. This is the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. They deal with war crimes, human rights violations, and genocide. You saw this in the Nuremberg trials following World War II. They attempt to ensure that nations are accountable to the world as a whole, not only to their own governments.